You have worked your butt off, late nights, lots of coffee, energy drinks and other unhealthy habits. You have mastered your animation curves, trimmed them, cared for them, animated lights, particles and all that good stuff. Your computer has been running non-stop rendering your beautiful frames. You are finally ready to show the client the animation. You give it a nice name, you know you are at the end of the project, you package it nicely and simple. You send it off and can finally breathe out and chill for a bit. But then your inbox receives a new message. And it's not the glorious no notes you hoped for. It's not that at all. It's actually quite the opposite. A lot of notes. And even drawings on top of your frames. That's right, the client drew red arrows on top of your frames. If just there was a way you could do some damage control, make the process a little bit more smooth, well, maybe there is. Okay, so while this story might have been exaggerated a little bit, you still might recognize some of the frustrations that could be in it. I know I certainly do. If you haven't had much experience with client work, then this might help you or might save you some pains in the future. And if you have the experience but still struggle with some of this, then this video might help. When you're working on a project, as you know, there's a lot of different elements that makes up the work. If you're making a film or video, animation is certainly one of the biggest elements and can also be one of the most time-consuming. Which is why it's so important to have a solid process on how this is presented to the client and have a system that makes everything go as smoothly as possible. I think an important note here is that this isn't just for us as artists to not do extra work or do double work, it's actually also to give the client an understanding of how we work. Most clients are actually not interested in being a pain in the ass. Well, most of them are not, but if they aren't properly informed about the process, then we are not really doing our part either. I have to say I've been, and probably still am, guilty of not doing my part. I've often been mad at the feedback, thinking this means I have to go multiple steps back and do re-renders or re-animate scenes, redo things that I think could have been avoided if I had just been more clear on my process. We as artists should of course take some of the responsibility and make sure to inform our clients. This actually also makes us look good, since it does sound a bit more professional to tell the client, this is the pipeline and this is what we need from you. One of our formal roles as artists, if we are communicating with the client, is to make them feel comfortable. You have to be empathetic towards them and think that they're about to invest hopefully a big amount of money and they will like to know what they're getting. Since this is creative work, you can't always tell them what the exact final result is going to be, since, well, that would be the final product. But there's a lot of steps that you can inform them about, which will make them more comfortable and will be optimal for your process as well. One of the steps in the CG pipeline is animatics, previs or playblasts, different names for the same thing. All of the steps of your process should have an important role, a reason for being there. What then is the purpose of the animatic? Let's say you are working on a project where the client has given the green light to style frames, the visual look, and you're now moving on to the animation. Instead of animating everything and rendering it out as final, you can either do low quality render, or what I prefer to do is a viewport render or playblast. The danger in this can be that they will look at the gray or flat render and think, this is not what I thought the animation would look like. So once again, as long as you inform them that the style frames you sent them is the final look and that the animatic is to showcase the timing and movement of the film, I think you're good. Informing them about this certainly comes a long way, or goes a long way. If you're working on a film for a robotics company, for example, this stage can be really important, because you are giving the client a chance to comment on their product's movement and you can correct it before spending any time on rendering. It speeds up the process. I actually think the grayish or flat boring look can be an advantage, since you split the client's improvement/comment rounds into categories. So the storyboard phase is for story, the style frame stage is for the visual look, and the animatic is for the movement and timing. This gives the client less to focus on and it might not be as overwhelming. What I personally like to do before starting on the animation is for the client to sign off on the visual look of each scene. Then tell them that this process is locked and we are now moving on to the movement/animation part. I think most clients actually understand this pretty well. I sometimes need to maybe tell a story from like a different field. For example, tell them that if it's like building a house, when you have already, you have your working plan, the plan of the house, the architect, what are they called? The architect drawings, whatever they're called. And that's like the first step. Maybe that's our storyboard. And then when we have built the walls, we're not really gonna tear down the walls. That wouldn't really be very efficient. Just like after you've painted all the walls, you're not really gonna say, well, maybe can you change the color of all the paint in the whole house? And I try to explain it in that way, because some clients obviously haven't worked with 3D before maybe, or some clients just don't know our pipeline. When I send the animatic, I always write something like, remember that the style frames you approved is the final look, so pause the film, take a look at the images to get the visual look and feel, and remember the animatic is for timing and movement. And when this is approved, they will get to see the final film. Each 3D software have a different way of rendering a playblast or viewport render, but generally the same principle applies. It will not be that pretty, but it will be fast and convenient. I know these things are not the most sexy to talk about, but I think it's really crucial to have a good process, both for yourself and for your client. I have by no means a perfect process, and I don't kid myself about having the correct one. I probably don't. I think the most important thing is really just to learn as we go, reflect on what works, learn from others, and then, really just be in constant improvement. And on that note, I hope you find this video useful and that it might be a little bit of help towards you becoming a better professional artist. As I said, I'm on this journey myself and trying just to become better, figuring out both on the artist side and on the business side. So let's do it together.